Hello, and welcome back to episode 19 of the Less is More Education podcast with your host, Steve Flores. And this is another book review week. We have a lot of book reviews coming up because I've been doing a lot of research. So this week we review the book Empowered Educators by Linda Darling Hammond and the folks over at Scope. Scope is the Stanford Center of Opportunity Policy in Education. And so it's like an organization run out of Stanford that takes a look at policies to see if we can create like a more equitable system. And this book was really, really interesting. But before we get into it, this is only going to be part one of this review because I thought there was so much useful information in there, and I'd like to put it into context of California, so I'm going to need a lot of episodes to do that. But if you enjoy the podcast, the best thing you can do to support the podcast is to share and subscribe to the podcast, right? Share it with your friends, family, whoever you think you can find. Just tell them about it. You can email us at lessismore.education@skiff.com. That's skiff.com. You can find me on Instagram at lessismore.education, on Twitter at lessismoreeduc1, and a website is lessismore.education. I'll link the YouTube link below. Also, if you want to support us on Patreon, you can find us at patreon.com/lessismoreeducation. And you can also, if you prefer to read, you can find me on Substack at lessismoreeducation.substack.com. And all that's going to be in the description and notes below. So let's get into it. So this was a really important book, I guess, in terms of policy, because it's really relevant to what we're doing here in California. So the book is called Empowered Educators, and it's got like a ton of authors. Primary author is Linda Darling Hammond. If you've done any kind of research or looked at any kind of educational research, Linda Darling Hammond's name is going to sound super familiar because she's been doing research since like the 80s. And she's currently the head of the State Board of Education. So I'm hoping that, a lot of what she covered in this book was going to be applied in California. If she is, it's going to be awesome. If she isn't, then, we're going to have some struggles up ahead. So we'll see. So how was this book written? So this book was written using data from the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. That's called, shorthand is OECD. And what they do is they have a program called the Program for International Student Assessment, or PISA. And PISA is like these international tests that they give to a variety of countries. And you can see them, you can just look up any report and then you'll see like the rankings, and they'll have a math score, they'll have a reading score, a writing score, a science score, and they just kind of rank all of the countries by scores. And then they put up they also look at policies, and they also share out the data of like, all right, how do we improve education systems around the world? So it's pretty cool. It's a pretty cool organization. So PISA has been around, I think the first one was in 2000, and in 2000, Finland came out as number one. I covered that in other podcasts. It's a pretty remarkable story considering their economy collapsed 8 years earlier. But they've had economic reforms starting like in the 70s that kind of led to a culmination of them being on top. And they're still one of the top countries. And they're also one of the happiest countries. So that's important to note right there. So they look at 5 different jurisdictions: Australia, Canada, Finland, Shanghai, and Singapore. And the way they chose these 5 countries was they looked at PISA scores, right, to see how they're doing academically. And then what they did is they looked at equity. So they looked at the difference between the highest scores and lowest scores as connected to your socioeconomic status. So basically, if a poor person scores about the same as a rich person, then that's a highly equitable system. And so they other criteria was they looked for countries that had diverse populations. Now, none of these countries are going to be as diverse as the United States, but they do have fair amounts of diversity. So, you're looking at Australia. Australia is pretty diverse. They accept a lot of immigrants from all over the world, particularly in Asia. Canada is a pretty diverse place. Again, they accept a lot of refugees. Finland is probably like the least diverse of all these places, but about 91% of their population is Finnish, and then the other 9%, which is a healthy amount, are people from other lands. And Shanghai is pretty diverse because it's a business hub of pretty much all of Asia. And so is Singapore. Singapore is the same thing. They have a huge Indian population as well. They have Singaporeans. They have a lot of ethnic Chinese, as well as some European, Australian, and American expatriates also living in Singapore. So the two countries in there that I thought were pretty interesting were Singapore, because economically they're doing amazingly, right? And Finland, again, also, I'm just a big fan of Finland because they're also the happiest country on earth. So what they did is they took a look at their policies, and then they kind of put them into like these 8 different categories. And they are the preparation of teachers, infrastructure that maintains high quality of teaching. The 8 policies are not those. The 8 policies are preparation, induction and mentoring, ongoing professional learning, appraisal and feedback, career and leadership development, curriculum and assessment, school funding, and organization. So I'm going to go through each one of those to kind of give you insight as to what any of those means. But it's pretty comprehensive, which is another reason why I really enjoyed the book. And I really think that if we understand the policies, then we can understand how to fix our current system here in California. And again, there is a problem in California. According to the U.S. World News Report, we're ranked 40th in the United States for our education system. So we're at the bottom of the pack. And as far as funding is, I think we're ranked 18th in funding, which is, at the top, on the top half. So we're spending more and we're getting less results. And that's just within the context of the United States. Now, if you look at the OECD PISA reports, the United States as a whole is not doing well either. I think we're ranked something like 27th or so in the latest PISA report. So we're not doing great, as a state in the country, and the country itself is not doing good or great in the economic or in the world education space. So we have a lot to learn, and I found like a lot of these policies really, really interesting. So let's go over the first policy. First, I'm going to go over the policies as they are, like what does good policy look like? And then I'm going to go through and highlight how California deals with these things. All right, what are the modern Californian policies? So what are the effective policies? So let's take a look at recruitment. One of the most interesting things about all these jurisdictions is that they don't have a dearth of teachers. They have plenty of applicants, lots of people wanting to be teachers, right? But they don't, which is the opposite in California. The interesting part is that they are really, really selective on who gets to be a teacher. And so what they're looking at is trying to attract the best students at the high school and at the college level, right? So some jurisdictions like Finland, they try to recruit high school students because high school students can go straight from high school into a university and go through a 5-year process of becoming a primary school teacher, right? And that 5 years includes their undergraduate as well as a research-based master's degree. So they put the standard really high, and then they prepare them to like a really high extent as well. So what kind of things are they looking for when they're recruiting, their potential teachers? They look at all sorts of things, like, so not just grades. They also look at aspects of your personality, and places like Singapore actually screen people out who don't have personalities that are conducive to teaching, because they really feel like, all right, we don't just want high scores, we also want people that want to be in the classroom, right? And they have like a whole screening process for all of that, and it's very intense. And so the standards are really high. It's really difficult to get in. And the other nice thing about recruitment is that they try to select for like people that may have the potential to teach, right? So they also look at, all right, are these candidates people that have worked in the education space in the past, right? Were they tutors? Were they mentors? What is it exactly that they were doing before they came into the teacher preparation program? So it's very interesting. As far as, let's look at the next policy, which is preparation. Preparation was really, really intense in most of these jurisdictions. So it involves content-specific training, and involves pedagogical training. So that means like teaching how to teach. And this is something that's really important that we do not do a whole lot of here, and that is clinical training. So clinical training means that they take candidates and they put them in classrooms while they're getting their degree for short periods of time, right? And usually it's like progressive. So, a candidate will go to a school and teach like one lesson, and then they'll come back and they'll review how it went, and then they'll progressively go on to like maybe taking over a classroom for a couple of days, then maybe a few weeks, then maybe a couple of months, and then each time they get brought back in and they review, all right, how did that go, right? And they're taught, with a mentor, to go over the data that they collect. They look at artifacts, they look at input from the lead teacher of the classroom. So a lot of clinical training was really interesting. And there was also a lot of places that had actual schools that were like training schools. It's almost like in medicine, how we have like training school or training hospitals. They have training schools for actual schools, for primary schools and secondary schools. So I was like, that's really interesting. And that's something that we don't do a whole lot of here. And the other interesting thing is that most of these jurisdictions had a huge emphasis on cooperation. Can you work with other teachers? Because, that's how you get the best teaching done, is you work with others. And I was like, that's really interesting. And that's very different from the isolated teacher that exists here in California. Next is induction programs. So induction programs are these programs to help out teachers once they're in the classroom. So most of these induction programs last 1 to 2 years. We have an induction program here in California that is about 2 years, I believe. Last time I checked, it was 2 years. And all these induction partners partner new teachers with really qualified and trained mentor teachers. So they're not just grabbing any teacher that's available to be their mentor. They're looking at the best teachers and they're asking them, hey, can you be a mentor? And not only are they, highly qualified, they take mentors or potential mentors and they train them on how to be a mentor. And they train them how to talk to these new incoming teachers, how to go over data with them, how to go over the process of evaluating your own work, evaluating students. They grade each other, they observe each other, right? And it's really, really intense in this induction program. And so a lot of it is on of the induction programs involve self-reflection and reflection on how an excellent teacher teaches as well, right? So you're not just reflecting on yourself, you're reflecting on another teacher's work, which is really interesting. And next is going to be ongoing learning, right? So ongoing learning is, all right, so you've become a teacher, you've already been inducted. Are you just gonna like fizzle out and get stale? No. What you're gonna do is you're gonna continue training, continue learning, continue growing for the whole life of your teaching career, which is really amazing, which I thought was a really good philosophy. So teachers are continually getting better. And so how much training? So it was actually, a lot of this was in their policies, where some people or some jurisdictions allow for 20 days of professional development a year. Some of them, they set it by every 5 years, which is interesting. Like you have to get 100 days of professional development in 5 years. Some places it was up to like 250 days of professional development in 5 years. So you have like time to kind of like spread it out. Maybe some years you want to do more, some years you do want to do less. But it was like an expectation that you constantly get better at your practice. And so they'll send you to conferences, they'll send you to work with other teachers in other school districts or even within your own school. It was really interesting to read about all of these. And I'm going to go in later podcasts into more detail as to how all of this is done. Next is teacher appraisal and feedback. So how do you give feedback to teachers, right? And this is what I found was really interesting, really different than what we do here, is that a lot of the appraisal and feedback that's given to teachers is done by other teachers. So they take more senior teachers and those teachers evaluate the new teachers, the beginning teachers. They call them BTs in some places. And so you're being watched by somebody who's actively teaching, which is very different than what's going on in California, which I'll talk about later on. And the other thing is feedback is always done with the intent of improving the teacher. It's never done punitively. It's never like, oh, like you've got a 3 on this checklist of things, and now you need to go and get this training and this thing. Like it was never like punitive, like you're getting punished or your ability to teach, right? Whether or not you stay on or get hired is dependent on all these evaluations. No. The goal is always like, all right, you've already made it this far. You've already run the gauntlet of getting accepted into a teacher preparation program. You've already gotten tons of training in your teacher preparation program. You went through your induction. Now, what we want to do is we want to keep you. So we're going to focus all of our appraisals on how to improve something. And a lot of it was teacher selected, right? So if I'm getting observed, the incoming teacher, I say, hey, I want you to look at my classroom management and see if you can help me improve my classroom management. And then the observing teacher will just have that lens of classroom management. And we're going to focus there. And they'll give feedback specifically on that and how to improve and how to get better. And then they'll do maybe rounds of that. That was really interesting. The next thing is like careers. So can you move up a career ladder, or are you given opportunities to take on leadership roles? So some jurisdictions had really well-defined career ladders in that like everyone starts off as a beginning teacher and you just start to, as you get more and more experience, doors start to open up, right? Oh, you've had this much experience. Now let's take a look at, see if you can take on this leadership role of leading this team at the school. Now you've done that. Okay, now let's take a look at whether or not you can be an administrator at the school. Okay, you've done that. Okay, now let's see if you want an opportunity to go work at a district level or at a state level or at governmental level. And it's really interesting because if you move up a level, it doesn't necessarily mean you have to give up what you were doing before. So some people get into like these upper levels, but they're still continuing to teach. Maybe their load is a little bit less. Maybe they teach like 1 or 2 classes a day and then spend the rest of their day like mentoring or helping or supporting other teachers. And it's really like nice to see that you don't have to make a decision of, oh, do I get to teach or do I get to move up? right? No, you get to choose. Well, how much of this do you want to spend, right? How far up the career ladder do you want to go up? It's really dependent on you and how much work you do. And it's really dependent on, in some places, research comes into play when you're moving up the career ladder. So in places like Shanghai, you have to publish research, right? And then your publications determine how high up you can move in the career ladder, which is really interesting. Next is school curriculum and assessment. So school curriculum and assessment is, all right, what are we teaching the kids, and how are we testing them to see that they actually understand what they're getting, right? Or that what we're teaching. Most jurisdictions have the curriculum and the assessments determined by teachers, not by politicians, not by people high up, not by universities, right? But by the teachers themselves. So in certain places, like in Finland, it's controlled by the teachers at a school. In other places, it's maybe determined by like a district that pulls in a bunch of teachers from a bunch of different schools to come up with a curriculum and assessments. And it really is connected to teachers. And then it's up to teachers to decide, all right, what is the level of understanding that we're expecting from these students? And how is it that we're going to assessment, right? Is it appropriate to have a written out test? Or can we have a project to assess them? Or can we have like a portfolio to assessment? So the kind of assessments is really dependent on what the teachers choose for their students. So it's all teacher-led and teacher-driven curriculum and assessment, right? Which is very awesome. Next is school funding and organization. So this is the last policy that they took a look at. School funding is all about where are these schools getting their money from? So a lot of the jurisdictions focus on equity, right? So they have some amount of money, they distribute it evenly amongst all the schools, and then they add in some money for any like special circumstances. And you see this a lot where there's a jurisdiction that has a lot of rural areas. So maybe like there's a small town way out in the boonies and it only has a few kids, but they still want it to be equitable to the education, like if you were in a large city where there's more people. So what they'll do is they'll supplement income for teachers that decide to go out there. So they go, oh, you have to go way out there, we'll give you a little bit of extra money in order to figure this out, in order to so that you can pay for, or it's worth it for you to teach in this rural and remote area. And things like that, right? So also for places that maybe are economically disadvantaged, they'll supplement them with like a little bit more money so that and it's really focused on the quality of the education, right? Can their quality of education be at the same level as if you had been lucky enough to have been born at a wealthy area? So socioeconomic status is not such a big deal. And that's, how they even made it into the book. Then the other part is school organization. So school organization refers mostly to like how schools are set up so that they can support their students and their teachers in getting all the work done. So in most of these jurisdictions, they really pay attention to, hey, can we set this up so that you have the time that you need to grade, to come up with curriculum, to work collaboratively with other teachers, to do all of your administrative tasks, right? And can we create a space so that you can, or a time for you to do all of that within your workday, right? So that's also very different from what we do here in California. So how does California compare along these 8 different policies? Well, in my opinion, we're failing our students from top to bottom. At every single one of these policies, we're failing and we're wasting a lot of money too, which is astounding, right? So let's take a look at becoming a teacher, right? So recruitment here. So in most of these places, they're trying to select these successful jurisdictions. They're trying to select teachers from that have a really that are like the best students essentially, or they have a lot of experience. Whereas in California, basically, if you have a pulse and no criminal record, you could probably become a teacher. Right? Oh, and a college degree, but that's like debatable right there. So for recruitment, we anyone can be a teacher, like literally anyone. We don't screen people really, and especially if there's a certain area where we need teachers, like we'll just accept anybody really, and I saw it all the time in, like, especially in science, especially in physics, right? So it's like, all right, we don't have enough physics teachers, so we'll just, if anyone has a physics degree, we'll just accept them right away into the program. Well, how many people with physics degrees are rushing to be teachers? Not very many. Right? I'm going to tell you that right now, because if you have a physics degree, you can go work in industry and your starting salary is twice what it would be becoming a teacher. So it's like, wow, what are we doing here? Why? It doesn't even make sense to enter the classroom, right? So the entry to becoming teachers is not that, it's just not that high, right? So, and we're struggling too. There's a teacher deficit in California that's existed for a while, and it's getting worse, right? A lot of teachers are leaving because of so much top-down control, and we'll talk about that later on. Next, let's take a look at preparation. So in most jurisdictions that are successful, teachers, once you get accepted into a program, you don't have to pay for that program, right? It's all state funded. And in some places, they even give people going through their teacher preparation program a stipend so that they can live and pay bills while they learn to become a teacher, right? Whereas here, if you want to become a teacher, it's all out of pocket, right? You're going to have to pay for all that. You're going to have to pay for your program. You might be able to take out a loan to pay for it, but either way, you're giving up some of your salary, some of your money to go through this program. And forget about getting a stipend. You're not getting that. So in California, I think the credentialing program is a 2-year program where the first year you go through like pedagogy and skills. And if you listen to my other podcasts, you'll hear that other teachers that have gone through the credentialing program in California don't think very much of it. Like, honestly, when I went through my credentialing program, I'm going to say about like 10% of all that I went through was useful, right? And a lot of it was just like a huge waste of time and bureaucratic work. And some of the things I learned were just straight up wrong. Like they just weren't like supported by anything. So one idea was like the idea of multiple intelligences. Turns out that is not a thing. It's just not a thing. But I was taught in my credentialing program about multiple intelligences. Yeah. So that lack of uniformity in and there's a lack of uniformity even how we prepare teachers, right? You can go through one program and it'll be a little bit more intensive, and another program and it'll be less. But overall, a lot of teachers that I know didn't feel like they got much from the program, right? And they have you do like such extreme things that you're just like, I don't know. Do I need to write like a 20-page lesson plan for every lesson I'm going to teach? Like, seems excessive, right? But that's what they tell you to do, and as far as I know, nobody does that. All right. Also, there's no culture of cooperation when we prepare teachers. Like, there isn't. I can't remember a single time where I was like given a partner and going like, all right, you're going to do these things together and you're going to, come up with this thing together, and this is how you cooperate, and this is how you share out ideas, and this is how. There's none of that. It's like pretty much you're on your own, right? All right, we're going to help you find a school to go look at and observe. Go over there, go observe them, take some notes. Here's some things that you should probably look out for. And we're going to come back. We're going to talk about it. And it's not very cooperative. It's pretty much everyone on their own. So preparation in California, not really great. Induction programs. When I was a beginning teacher, we had to go through what's called the Beginning Teacher Support and Assessment Program, BTSA. Everyone I talked to who went through BTSA saw it as a waste of time. Like, it was just not useful, not helpful. I wrote down, like, the god of bureaucracy wrote the BTSA forms on his birthday. Like, it was just the biggest, most repetitive waste of time I had ever gone through. Like, I got nothing out of it, like literally nothing. I was just like, okay, I just gotta write something. I gotta do these things. And I listened to some other podcasts of other teachers, like Teachers Off Duty, and even they will talk about, their induction programs as being like, it was just some slog, some added thing that we had to do at the beginning of our teaching careers. And that's really bad because a beginning teacher, all in California, and it sounds like in most other places in the United States, already has it hard, right? Most other places most of these highly effective systems prepare their teachers so that by the time they leave, they have a full curriculum and they're ready to teach on that first day. We do not do that here, right? We just don't give them any of that. We just send them out there and it's sink or swim. So you go into a new classroom or a classroom, you're a new teacher, you are now being told, all right, you have a full load. In some of these other jurisdictions, they reduce the load for new teachers because they know that they're trying to go through the ropes and they need time to cooperate with their mentor teachers. So they'll reduce their load, right? Whereas here, it's like, nope, full time, ready, set, go. And then you have to go meet with your mentor teacher. You have to teach your full-time position. You have to fill out BTSA. You have to write out your curriculum. It's the most difficult thing in the world to be a new teacher in California. Like, it's so difficult. And what makes it worse is knowing that other people that have your degree are getting paid a lot more than you. Like, here's an indicator. When I graduated from college with my chemistry degree, I went to work in industry and I was already making about $65,000 a year. Like, just going and getting a job. And that was like, even as an intern, like, it was even like I had no experience, right? I could just go work $65,000. I became a teacher because I did not enjoy working in industry. So when I went to go work in industry and then I started looking at my first paychecks, I was just like, what is going on here? Where's my money? Like, seriously, like, where is it? Did it disappear? Where's it gone? Because I was making something like $45,000 a year as a beginning teacher, right? Like, I lost like something like $20,000 a year just deciding to go become a teacher. Like, where's the justice in that, right? And the teacher's job is the most important thing because we're getting the next generation ready for their lives, right? And we're underpaying teachers in order to get them to that point. I don't know. That was just got me really, really upset. So induction programs here, just a huge waste of time. And the bureaucracy is just horrible. All right. Next up is ongoing learning. So if you want ongoing learning, what I noticed was when I first started teaching, it was all on your own dollar, right? You want to go to a conference, you want to go take some time to learn something, like and go to a workshop, that's all on you, bro. Like, you figure it out. And then later on, as time went on, we started to get more and more money for professional development. But, huge but, is your district and your school got to choose for you what you're going to get your professional development in. Like, you don't get to choose. You just don't, right? Like, sorry. Like, so the professional development is not tailored to teachers in California, right? And a lot of it is just an exercise in bureaucracy, right? There was literally a picture of a wheel with all of our practices on it, and the district would just pick a section of that wheel and go like, all right, we're going to focus on this now. And all the PD for this year is just going to be on that. You don't get to choose as a teacher what professional development you're going to get. You just don't get to choose it. Nope, sorry. We don't trust you. That's what it comes off as we don't trust you to do good professional development. But in most of the other jurisdictions, the professional development that they got was tailored to them, right? So when I say most of the other jurisdictions, I'm talking about these highly effective schools, highly effective and equitable schools. So they looked at, so teachers were, when they're being given appraisals and feedback, if they are found to have something that they're struggling with, then most jurisdictions will try and find a professional development to fit that need for the individual teacher. And they'll pay for the teacher to go off to a conference and get that need met, right? So if you're struggling in classroom management, they'll look for PDs that involve classroom management. They'll let you choose which one you want to go to. They'll pay for you to go out there for your airline ticket, for your hotel stay. Maybe they'll give you even a stipend, and you'll go through that professional development over there, and then you'll come back, bring your learning, maybe share it out with the rest of the group, and apply it in your classroom. So it's very tailored to what the individual teachers need, which is awesome, right? But over here, it's like, no, we're going to choose for you. We have our own goals. We need it, because the state is telling us we need to do these things, so we're going to impose it on you. So there's not a whole lot of autonomy going on, which is kind of sucky. Teacher appraisal and feedback. How does that work in California? Well, in California, teachers aren't giving you appraisal and feedback. I mean, why would we give other people that are working in education currently the opportunity to share their knowledge with you? That seems insane. Instead, in California, here's what we're going to do. We're going to make administrators the people that appraise you, right? So administrators, yes, granted, some of them were teachers. Were they teachers in your specific domain? Probably not, right? Probably not. And how long have they been out of the classroom? Oh, quite a while, some of them, right? So these people who aren't currently in the classroom, who probably don't know your specific content area, are going to go into your classroom and they're going to tell you what you're doing well and what you're doing poorly in teaching. Does that seem like an efficient use of time or resources or manpower? It doesn't to me, right? So what are we doing here? What are we doing here? That's my big question. That throughout this whole time I've been reading this book, that's always been my question. What are we doing here? I don't know. I have no clue what we're doing here. All right. Next is a career ladder. Well, if you want to go up the career ladder in California, you pretty much have to go back to school. Again, you got to pay for that out of pocket or take out a loan. Just pay for it yourself, right? Out of your meager teacher salary. And then maybe you can get an administrative credential, and then you get to completely leave your classroom, and then so that you can go into a position where you can tell other teachers what they're doing wrong. It just doesn't make sense. Just doesn't make sense. And that's how you climb the career ladder. You get more degrees, right? More credentials, and then you move up. And then as you move up, you get paid more, right? The other way is if you take more classes, right? So we have you can think of it like as a grid of pay, right? And how many classes, college level classes you've taken moves you up the ladder, right? So if you want to move all the way to the right, then have a master's or a PhD. And then once you get to that level, then you get the maximum amount of pay. And then the other part is time. So how long you've been a teacher, that's the other axis. So how many classes have you taken, how long you've been a teacher, that determines your pay. That's it, all right? And it's really weird because if you want to be a teacher and get to the furthest end, you got to have a master's. And they've done studies on this, on teachers that have masters, to see if their teaching quality is any better than a teacher that just has a bachelor's degree. And the answer to that is no, they don't. So essentially what we're doing is we're paying teachers to get these degrees that don't help them in their teaching, and we're just giving them more money as opposed to merit. Now, how are we going to attract, new teachers to be a part of this system? Doesn't make sense. It just doesn't make sense, right? So that's how the career ladder works. All right, school curriculum and assessment. In most of these highly effective jurisdictions, the curriculum and the assessment, what was really interesting is reading that a lot of these jurisdictions just have like a basic framework that is probably like anywhere between 5 to 20 pages long. And then they give that to all the schools and says, all right, base your curriculum off of this. And then the schools, the local districts will look at that, they'll turn it into a curriculum, the teachers will, and then the teachers will create assessments for them, and then it's all done in-house. Okay, what are we doing here in California? Well, remember that framework that I just talked about? That 5 to 10, 20 page long document that tells you what you should be teaching? In California, the science framework, right? Next generation science standards. The science framework alone. So we're not even talking about math. We're not talking about history. We're not talking about reading, writing, like your English classes, your foreign language classes, none of that. Just the science framework is 1,500 pages long. Let that sink in. Right? 1,500 pages long. And it tells you everything that you need to know, that you need to do as a teacher. It tells you what the content the students need to know. It tells you what skills they need to have. It tells you what cross-cutting concepts they need to know. And then it tells you how to teach it, right? It's all in there. And it's all developed from the top down. So you have to do this. Go ahead and do it. All right? And it's like, all right, where's the autonomy there? Where's the, why would anyone participate in this system? That seems insane, right? Like it just doesn't make sense. I don't get any choice. I'm supposed to be the content expert. I don't get any say in any of this? Okay. All right, cool. Let's keep it going. Funding. Let's take a look at funding. Most of the funding in California comes, all right, so this is from greatest amount to least amount. Income taxes. Income taxes pay for most of our schools in California. What was really interesting was reading that in California, people that earn $500,000 and more pay 50% of all the taxes, right? That is insane. Like everyone else that earns less than them is like only pays the other half, which is, I was like, wow, that's really interesting. I don't know. I just found that interesting. So most of the people that are paying for our education are rich people. All right. So we have income taxes, property taxes, federal funds, other local sources, the lottery. The lottery is actually not that much, even though the lottery goes up to like billions, sometimes $1 billion or over $1 billion or hundreds of millions of dollars. If you take all the taxes out of that and add it up to like what the total budget is for education in California, it only adds up to like 1%, which is pretty astounding, right? Yeah. So that's not what's paying for our education system. It's mostly income taxes. So all this money goes to the state, and then the state creates this formula. It's called the local control funding formula, and that's how they distribute out the monies. And the local control funding formula is mainly attendance rates, and there's like all these other subcategories for like if you keep K through third grade classrooms a certain size, then you get a little bit more money. Or if you have a lot of English language learners, then you get a little bit of more money. Or if you have a disproportionate amount of students that are free on assisted lunch, then you get a little bit more money. So there's like an incentive to kind of have a school that has a lot of assisted lunch and English language learners, which is interesting, So there's our funding. Now that's for most school districts. Now, if you live in a school district where you have a lot of taxes, so if you, I think it's based on property taxes. So if the property taxes amount in your location is greater, there's a certain percentage of that is greater than what you would have gotten from the state, from the local control, LCFF, then you don't have, what you can do is you can take the other option, which is not accept LCFF money, so not accept the state money, and just use local property taxes to pay for your education system. So what that means is if you live in an area that has really, that can generate a lot of money from property taxes, then your district will have more money than all the other, all the other districts, right? So what that means is if you're in a rich area, you get more money. Your school just gets more money. Absolutely, right? Than most other school districts. So there's still a benefit to living in a particularly rich area, right? So that's nice. Next is going to be not just our funding, but our organization, right? So how are we organized here? Do we give time for teachers in California to collaborate? The answer is no. Most teachers get less than an hour a day to collaborate and do their administrative work and do their grading and do their curriculum writing, right? To develop lessons and to do any really professional development that is being required of them. So whatever time that we're being given is, being sucked up by all these, there's no time to collaborate. At my own personal school, we were all sent to this PLC conference, which is, these small learning community conferences, and where they taught us how to collaborate, right? So how do you look at data? How do you, work collaboratively? How do you set goals? It was really excellent. I really think that if we had applied all of that, then our school would have improved greatly. The problem is we weren't given time to do any of that. So what winds up happening is they give us a lot of time at the beginning of the year where we, do a lot of collaborating. And then when we get exhausted and we have too much work to do, all that just kind of disappears. And by the end of the year, it's every man for himself trying to just survive the year, right? Which sucks because it's the students that suffer from that system. So what is it exactly that we're doing? All right. So there's not really a whole lot of time to collaborate. There is more time that's being given to go to conferences and stuff that's be optional, right? So meaning if you want to collaborate, then the district will pay you and your colleague to come into the district or the school to do some lesson planning, but that all occurs maybe a couple times a year outside of the regular school year. Now, if you want honest and good collaboration, from all the jurisdictions I saw, they needed a weekly, sometimes daily time to collaborate, right? Which we definitely don't have here. All right, so we're failing. California is just failing our students from top to bottom. And so how do we fix that? That's the big question. How do we fix any of this? I think there are two places that we can kind of focus on first. I think we need to start by clearly defining a purpose for education. We need a unified and actionable purpose for education. Right now, the purpose of education is set by whoever's running the CDE this year, right? And each person just changes it up, changes what they want to focus on, and that we just can't have that happen anymore. If we want a good system, like in most of these other jurisdictions, they have a clear purpose for education, whether it's to make students more moral, more knowledgeable, more effective workers. We need something. So I emailed a while ago Pazzi Sahlberg and asked him what's the purpose of education. And so I took his purpose and I kind of I added a little bit to it to kind of make it more relevant to here in the United States. And so this is what I came up with: to holistically develop young people to realize their passions and take the lead in their own lives so that they may take responsibility for themselves and contributing to society. This is my purpose for education, right? And is this perfect? Probably not. Honestly, it's probably not. So my goal is to figure out, all right, can I make this as good as possible? And then can we come up with a consensus as to what the best purpose is? And can we codify that into our framework for education in the state of California? Now, there are some things that I do like about this purpose. And that is that it's very actionable. Right? So, for example, if we're trying to get young people to realize their passions, then they're going to need examples of that. That means that their teachers have to be people that have realized their passions. So, screening teachers, so that we can select for traits that are conducive to learning or teaching, will be helpful in that process. We should be screening teachers for their passions, right? Are you passionate about this kind of work? We should be more selective. And that's the one thing that I found amazing about all this is if we want more teachers, here's what we shouldn't do: lower the standards. What we should do is raise the standards and raise the barriers to becoming a teacher and compensate teachers like other professionals. For example, in Singapore, they pay their teachers the same as their engineers and accountants, right? So they have a set scale. They're like, all right, engineers getting paid this much. This is what we're going to set teacher pay to, right? And that scales up as well. But that's what we need to have teachers be considered professionals. If we don't do that, they're not really considered professionals. All right. So that's one thing, is we need something that we can kind of if we have a policy, we can grade it up against this purpose and see all right, does this policy fit this purpose? If yes, cool, let's move forward. If not, then it's just a waste of time, right? Next is we need to root whatever policies we have into some values, because and something that is values that stand the test of time and the test of the scientific method. We've known, here's an example, right? We've known for a long time that if you want to be a happy, successful, purpose-driven person, you got to have a lot of autonomy in your life. You got to have a lot of choice, right? That is a fundamental principle. And because that is a fundamental principle, that needs to be included in however we mold our education system. So if we want to develop autonomous beings, then students need more choices in what classes they're going to take, when they're going to take them, right? And we need to give them that practice time of making those decisions so that they can make the right choices and the guidance to do that. But we're not doing that. We don't even give teachers autonomy. Teachers are now being told not only what to teach, how to teach it, and what they're going to learn, right? So there's no autonomy in anywhere in here. So this just turns into like this huge waste of time, right? And that's, so those are the two things. We need a purpose, we need clearly defined values, and then we can make the system better, right? So next week I'm going to come up, or the next upcoming weeks, I'm going to come up with other parts where I go into details as to how these education systems implement each of these policies. And I hope you stick around for that. All right. So the mission of Less is More Education podcast is to determine and promote a unifying purpose in education, for education to be adopted at the state level, like policy-wise. If you really enjoyed this, listening to this podcast, again, shout it out, share it, go show other people how to get a podcast. A lot of people just don't even know how to do that. So if you want to join me on my journey, just recommend it. You can follow me on social media. You can email me at lessismore.education@skiff.com. Find me on Instagram, lessismore.education. On Twitter at lessismore.educ1. My website is lessismore.education. YouTube link is going to be below. You want to follow, if you want to contribute, you can contribute to the podcast on Patreon at patreon.com/lessismoreeducation, or you can follow me on Substack at lessismoreeducation.substack.com. And thank you for joining me.